I usually don't take people's compliment very seriously. But something happened last Wednesday that made me realize the way I see myself is very different from other people see me. It was after my jujitsu training. I was sitting there with the coach and told him I'm having a tournament coming up this weekend. I'm really nervous about it. And then asking about his opinion on what should I do. He gave me some advice, and in the end, he said, "Congratulations." And I looked at him, I was surprised, like, what? It hasn't happened yet. Why do you congratulate me? And he said, "I say congratulations because I already know that you're going to win." Now, there's some part of me knowing that Americans give so much compliment compared to Asian. The amount of "good job, you are doing great," I hear in the US in the last several years exceeds the total amount of compliment I'd ever heard of growing up in China for more than 18 years. But that sentence really made me reflect because when he said, "I know you're going to win," he has this look of seriousness in his eyes. But in the back of my mind, quietly, I immediately replied to him and myself that I think I'm going to lose. And as a therapist myself, I know self-fulfilling prophecy super well. So if you are going to competition thinking you are going to lose, then you already lost. So as I was driving home, I kept thinking about him telling me, "Congratulations, I know that you're going to win." And my response, "No, I'm going to lose." He could be just saying it as a way to be positive. However, in the back of my mind, what I'm really questioning is, why do I have this immediate response that I know I'm going to lose? I don't know I'm going to lose. There's a chance I can win. We always say in a jiu-jitsu match, before the competition starts, everyone has a 50% of chance of winning. Things happen so fast, so who knows what's going to happen? But if you have this mindset of "I'm losing," then going into a match, you pretty much already lost the match. So being a therapist myself and always trying to figure out what's the best way to deal with competition, I really looked hard on my response on it. That night, I actually had a very interesting dream. I had this vivid dream where I was in a debate team, so it's a team of 4, and then they asked me to sit as the first debater so I could give the opening statement because they believe in my ability. After I give the opening statement, the referee and my opponents look at me and laugh and said, "What kind of opening statement is that? That doesn't make sense at all, and you're using the wrong word. You interpret the words wrong." And my teammates also look at me and said, "What are you doing?" I feel such deep sense of shame, and I felt so small at that moment in a dream. That night, I woke up from that dream, and I took a mental note of this feeling of shame and the debate, and I remind myself I need to keep thinking about it next day. So the second day when I got up, I connected the dot immediately. I was in a debate tournament when I was in high school, and my first tournament I did was one of my friend. I actually won one of the award that's called the best debater, which I was really surprised at it. And then the second time, I went back to my home city, and my boyfriend at that time visited me from another city, and we two formed a debate team together to compete. He was way more advanced in debate than me. He has more years debating, and he was the one who introduced me to debate in the first place. So immediately, I had this feeling I felt really small. And when we went on our first match against another team, I froze. I couldn't say anything. I completely forgot what I was going to say. The time slips by, and I just stood there and repeat the same thing that I just said. I felt so bad at a moment. As you can imagine, there are judges, there are audience, and everyone's looking at you, and you froze and you don't know what to say. It was a very embarrassing moment. And afterward, I went to the bathroom, I cried. I still remember I look at myself in the mirror and tell myself, "You need to get yourself together. You cannot be like that in front of my boyfriend at the time because you will let him down." After I left the bathroom, I was already beating myself up. My boyfriend at that time said to me, "Look like you're doing really bad. Why don't we just leave, quit the tournament and do something else and enjoy our time together instead of having a miserable time here?" And he didn't say anything about "I'm ashamed of you" or "you did a terrible job," but everything was implied at that moment. There's no "you can do it, it is okay to feel nervous." Of course, I understand that we were both high schooler. There's not a lot of emotional maturity in that. However, that is very intense moment of shame and the feeling of just your mind goes blank when people are staring at you, when the person that you love and care about is standing next to you with you at the same team. But this is not my first interaction with shame. As we all know, a lot of time when you find a spouse, you will find a spouse that's very similar to your parent. As I look back on my ex-boyfriends, they're very different, but they're similar in one way, that they all find a way to shame me for being who I am. And we all know relationship is a very good prototype of how you receive your feedback from your parents as a kid. As a girl, I tend to look for men who are like my dad. And this is a very normal part of human psychology. We see those people who we feel familiar with, and the people who we feel familiar with are usually our parents because they started first two people we see growing up. My dad is the first man I see in my life, and I know so well. So I'm going to seek out people like him. And that reminds me of my dad used to give me very, very hard math problem when I was a kid. I think this is part of his unlived math dream. He always called himself a king of math, and he was really good at math for sure. And also Chinese culture really emphasizes on being good at math. If you're good at math, you're a smart kid, you can be an engineer, you can do anything. So when I was a kid, my dad will find out these Olympic math problem and then put it on a little whiteboard and ask me to do it. A lot of time I couldn't figure out how to do it, and some of the questions he gave me later when I was in high school, I realized, oh my god, the person who solved this problem first is a math genius. They are like a Nobel Prize mathematician. How on earth am I going to solve that problem? But he was really mad at me for not being able to figure out the answer to the questions. He would use a very serious tone to tell me, use your brain, think about it. Think about it really well. And he would tell me when he was a kid, if he cannot figure out the answer to a question, he wouldn't go to bed. I remember those days when I stared at a whiteboard looking at these complicated math problems and just had no idea how to solve it. I cried. I remember I hated him so much. And I felt so angry at him because I learned to be obedient. I couldn't say much. So all I can do was to cry. And my dad would look at me crying and then he would say, what's the use of crying? Why do you cry? Crying cannot help you to solve this problem. That is actually a very normal thing Chinese parents say to their kids, especially in that generation. With the knowledge of psychology and looking back at that time, I realized his dismissal of my emotion isn't just to say, you shouldn't cry. It's more than that. It's a rejection of my emotion. It is a way of shaming. Shame is a very huge word if we translate it into Mandarin language. That's why we never purposely say it. And I'll be honest, living in China, I almost never heard the word shame spoken once. When I learned the English word shame, I feel like that's a very strong emotion. I would never connecting the way my dad treat me, connect the way my ex-boyfriends treat me as a way to shame me. However, it is. And it's because they've been shamed too. And in East Asian culture, shame is an emotion that's usually hid. We have the saying called 家丑不可外扬, which literal translation is, if there's something ugly happen in the family, do not tell the outsider about it. We keep it safe inside the family. Why? Because saving face. What about saving face makes it feel like it's such a big deal? Because there's a strong emotion of shame related to it. It's a similar reason I had language anxiety when I first got to US. I was so ashamed of my accent. I was ashamed of I am speaking a language different from other people. I am ashamed because other people are using a term they use every day when I, as an outsider, as a foreigner, does not understand what they're saying, and all of those bring me the sense of shame. As I work through my language anxiety, my social anxiety, now I realize shame still lingers there. It manifests when I compete. I compete in Jujitsu, and objectively speaking, I'm a pretty good athlete. I won the local tournaments. However, when I go to the bigger tournaments, one of the most popular Jiu-Jitsu tournament in the world called IBJJF, I can't even count how many times I lost and I got eliminated in the first round. And many times I traveled to another city, another state, paid for the hotel, paid for the flight ticket, paid for the tournament, went there and got injured the first several minutes. That is something that has happened to me so many times. But I'm also a person who doesn't give up easily, so I just keep trying and keep trying. During this process of trying, there are so many times eventually I have to doubt myself, asking myself, why are you still doing this? You're just making yourself more miserable. You're trying to bump your head against the wall. Why are you doing this? And eventually it gave me the sense of I signed up for a tournament, I went. However, even before I arrived there, I already know that I am going to lose. So that connects me back to the start of this video, the start of the story, when my coach told me, congratulations, I know you're going to win. And in my mind, I was like, no, I'm going to lose. And what I realized is the voice says, no, you're going to lose, is actually the voice coming from my dad, the voice coming from his dad and his dad's dad. It has a long history. It is a generational trauma. I hate to use the word trauma as someone who grew up in China because trauma usually means something really big, but I overlooked the impact of it. It started with something so small just because something bad happened in the family. We don't want other people to know it, just to protect safe face of the family. And eventually it carries over to my dad and my dad carried over to me. And now I carried all the way from China to the US. This deep sense of shame, it has such a profound impact. But the moment I saw it, a lot of things start to make sense. That voice at the back of my mind saying, you are going to lose. Look at you. You come here again and you lose again. Oh, you're just comforting yourself by saying, oh, I did it better than last time, but you still lose. And you're standing on a podium. So what? It's just a participation trophy. All of these voices are the generational trauma. What it is me shaming myself and my ancestors shaming themselves. And the beautiful thing is when I look at shame face to face, eye to eye, I realize it's nothing but a paper tiger. It doesn't have any power. It's trying to tell me not to try hard. It's trying to tell me to stay in my comfort zone. It's trying to tell me that anything uncomfortable is bad. So why do you have to try something when you are not getting anywhere? But that is not how things work. I've been reading Tim Ferriss' 4-Hour Workweek, and one thing he said really related to me. He said you need to look at what excites you in your life, and those are the things you need to do in your life. If something excites you, yes, you may fail, and chances are you're going to fail many, many times. But one day when you die, you look back at your life and you can close your eyes peacefully and said, I lived my life fully. I lived my life with authenticity, with courage, with kindness to myself, and I really helped myself grow. It is a long way to overcome a trauma. And I went to the competition this weekend and I still realized this voice is within me. There are many tiny moments as I was walking into the stadium, I'm walking onto the mat, I'm starting to warm up. The thought of who are you to try this? You know you're going to fail. You are competing against people who are so much better prepared than you are. Why are you even trying? But I already know I am doing the right thing. I am following my excitement. I'm following the meaning of my life. That is to do what I want to do, to try. No matter how many times I might fail, I will learn from it and I will bounce back and I'll keep walking forward. And as for the rest, these are the things I have no control over. It has been a very long journey to know that I am enough, and still I'm working on it. And learning psychology has this belief that we all have this sense of inferiority. Every single one of us constantly feel like we're not enough. It is part of being human. And I'm sharing my story because I realized those who are watching the video, you might also have some stories, some childhood trauma that led you to believe that you are not enough. If you look deeper into those dark thoughts, darkest moment of your life, what are some of the internal monologue you are having with yourself? And where does these words actually come from? Do they come from your mom, your dad, your grandparents? Or maybe it comes from even earlier. Drop a comment below and tell me about your discovery and your self-exploration. How is your self-belief shaped by other people around you? And what are some of the things that you can do to help you understand that you are in? Thank you for watching today's video, and if you're new to my channel, please subscribe. That's the best way to support me, and I'll be sharing a lot of my personal story and psychology for personal growth in my channel. I hope to see you in the next one.